Okay, let's get started. Well, good evening everyone, and a very warm welcome to the online edition of the Richmond and Teddington Wine Societies. I hope you're all well in these truly exceptional times. If you've attended our monthly tastings at the Britannia or the Landmark, you'll know that each month we focus on one of the many fascinating aspects of the wine world, and New Zealand was our subject for April. As we can't be together as usual this month, I have put together this short video which you can use to run a tasting of 6 New Zealand wines. In the video, I will go through all 6 wines, but you may want to do 1 or 2 of them per night and then come back to them over subsequent days or evenings. So, are you ready? If you've been following the recent emails, you are bound to be primed and poised, but if not, this is what you'll need. A couple of glasses, a sheet of white paper or the back of the tasting sheet if you've printed it off, a spittoon, don't know why I said that, they rarely get used. Some water perhaps to rinse out your mouth between tastes. Now the glasses I use are ISOs, approved by the International Standards Organisation, which allow the aromas to gather at the top of the glass. If you have these, then great, but of course any wine glass will do. So whether you are a professional or an enthusiastic amateur, you'll be fine. New Zealand is an amazing place. I led 3 groups on wine tours in 2014 and everyone was stunned by the quality of the wines, the fabulous scenery, the warmth and friendliness of the winemakers, and on top of that, the food was absolutely terrific. 5 out of the 6 wines we're going to taste come from wineries we visited back in 2014, so it's a wonderful opportunity to reminisce. Inevitably, but essentially, we're going to start with Sauvignon Blanc. Historically, Sauvignon Blanc is associated principally with the Loire Valley, Sancerre, and also Bordeaux. In New Zealand, it found stunning success in the mid-80s with Cloudy Bay, taking the world by storm with incredible freshness and intense flavours that we're now accustomed to. Sauvignon Blanc is now grown in every region in New Zealand, and none more so than Marlborough at the top of the South Island. Sauvignon Blanc represents 80% of all New Zealand wine exports. Now, we are not tasting Cloudy Bay, but we are going to taste 2 Sauvignon Blancs, which demonstrate the difference in quality, and then you can decide whether you get what you pay for. Now, our first wine is a basic Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, 2019 vintage, imaginatively called South Island. Marlborough, situated at the top of the South Island, is almost perfect wine growing country. Well-drained soils, plenty of sunshine, breezes and winds to keep frost and disease at bay, and Sauvignon Blanc positively thrives here. Now, remember the 4 S's technique: swirl, sniff, slurp and spit. So with this wine, we're going to literally look at colour first of all. Very pale, as you might expect for a 2019 vintage, all stainless steel fermentation, maturation, no oak treatment at all. So first of all, just giving it a swirl, break up the surface tension, release the aromas into the top of the glass. And then we move on to the second S, the sniff. Now, as you'll recall, there are 2 ways of taking the nose of the wine. Either one long snort or a series of short sniffettes. And first of all, what I'm getting on the nose is lovely, clean, fresh aromas. Nicely herbaceous, gooseberry fruit, very easy, very approachable. Bit of citrus, bit of sort of hints of tropical fruit as well. But as I say, very attractive, very open, very appealing straight away on the nose. Then moving on to the third S, the slurp. Now, 2-part process. Take a little sip first of all, just to understand the wine. Swallow straight away. You've got some idea what the wine tastes like. And then taste a larger mouthful. Give a larger mouthful first of all. And give the wine like a Listerine mouthwash. Leave no part of your mouth unexposed to the wine. And what that delivers is more taste, more sensations. So on the tip of the tongue, absolutely bone dry, really clean and fresh. Down the side of the tongue, nice acidity, nice refreshing sort of sense, makes you want to have another glass. And then the finish is nice and long, and nice sort of resounding, crisp fresh fruit flavours on the palate. So for me, this is great entry-level wine, good for quaffing, delivers everything you'd expect. Nice, easy, vibrant fruit, good acidity, an absolute classic example of Marlborough Sauvignon. And I think perhaps what is more remarkable about this wine is that it came over in a very large plastic sack. Now, I don't want to ruin the romance of wine, but it is perhaps more common than you might think. It comes over in containers, very clever packaging, but it is literally one big plastic sack of wine and taken to a bottling plant in Manchester, where it is then duly bottled. So it's good for the environment. We're not transporting bottles whole the way across the world, and it just shows that with that sort of technology in place, you can deliver still a very, very good entry-level quaffing kind of wine without having to ship the bottles over as well. As far as food matching goes with this first wine, I think this would be absolutely super with some fresh asparagus, absolutely in season right now, with some homemade hollandaise sauce and a poached egg. I think it'd be absolutely great. Now, with all the recipes that I'm going to be mentioning over the course of the tasting, you can find them all on my blog. So www.timsyradwines.com/blog. Our second wine is also a Sauvignon Blanc and from the 2019 vintage. And this is the Grey Whacker Sauvignon Blanc, made by Kevin Judd. Now, Kevin Judd set up the Grey Whacker estate back in 2009, having spent 25 years as head winemaker at Cloudy Bay. And he was absolutely responsible for the worldwide fame and fortune of Cloudy Bay. But 2009, he left, set up his own business, and now, I think it has to be said, he is producing some of New Zealand's finest wines at the moment. Absolutely superb winemaker, and he sources various parcels of fruit from around Marlborough to make this. And I think when you first of all look at it, it is a bit deeper in colour to the previous wine, and then give it a good swirl, take the nose. Now, first sensation of the nose is not quite as pronounced, not as overt as the South Island Sauvignon we had a few moments ago. But there's a concentration sort of lurking. It feels a bit closed, feels, just the concentration is there, but just not so easy to access. But what I'm getting on the nose is a richness, a concentration. There's sort of hints of sort of chamomile, yellow peaches, and also that sort of aroma. When you sort of rub a blackcurrant leaf between your fingers, that sort of intensity of aroma, and maybe just a little hint of chamomile as well, I think. Okay, let's move on to the third S, the slurp. Give it a taste. And this is where the concentration really comes through in comparison to the previous wine. There's a depth of fruit here. It feels much more substantial. There's a coating and layering all over the teeth, mouth and gums. And that's probably partly attributable to the fact that a portion of the wine is actually fermented in old wooden barrels, which will give a little bit of weight to the wine, whereas the majority of the wine is fermented in stainless steel using commercial yeasts. So this is Kevin Judd's most popular wine. It's the wine he makes most of, but I think little components of A, top quality fruit, B, the little bit of oak maturation or oak fermentation is just adding to the richness and concentration. Then finish, really long, really concentrated, lovely depth. Without any question, to me, this is a wine that could go on for 3, 4, 5 years, possibly longer. Now, with the Grey Whacker, in terms of food matching, I think that something we had the other night, which was hake en papillote. Absolutely delicious. A little bit of sun-dried tomatoes, some fresh herbs, some garlic. Went absolutely perfectly, and rather explains why there is actually none left in the bottle. But equally, whether it's hake, sea bass or trout, would all go absolutely perfectly with this. And again, the recipe from BBC Good Food on the website. The third wine we're going to taste is the Hawke's Bay Chardonnay 2016 from the Trinity Hill estate. Owned by John Hancock and Robert Wilson, who own the Bleeding Heart and Don restaurants in London. This is an absolute top class estate. Trinity Hill, the winemaker, a lovely guy called Warren Gibson, who we met back in 2014 while on tour. And pure Chardonnay, 100%, 2016 vintage. And key points to know with this is that it spent 11 months in a combination of the initial fermentation of the juice into wine, followed by a period of time undergoing a slow malolactic conversion also in French barrels, followed by a further 4 months in stainless steel tanks on its lees. And that lees contact will just give the wine a little bit more weight, a little bit more texture. Colour-wise, you'll see it's a little bit deeper than the two Sauvignons that we tasted earlier. That will be explained by a little bit of age, 2016, and the fact that the wine spent time in oak during fermentation and malolactic conversion. On the nose, give it a good swirl first of all, go on the nose. I think straight away you see that enormous difference between Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, particularly Chardonnay that's had some oak. Creamy, buttery, hints of vanilla, nice ripe tropical fruit coming through. And then on the palate, refreshing, really good acidity, and then again more a combination of sort of citrus and tropical fruit. Lovely sort of sense of oiliness over the teeth, mouth and gums, giving a real richness, which is a combination of the time in wood plus the lees aging. It gives this sort of lovely sort of sense of mouth feel. Long finish, can really taste it for a long time afterwards. So very harmonious, well balanced, medium to full bodied, great length. And I think for the Trinity Hill, in terms of finding a recipe, I think what we're looking to do is balance that nice fresh acidity, that little sort of dose of vanilla, that lovely length. So you need something with a little bit of weight. So I was thinking, as I often do, roast guinea fowl accompanied by a lemon and tarragon sauce. I think would actually pair with this wine absolutely perfectly. Again, the recipe's on the BBC Good Food site and on the blog. Okay, so the next two wines that we're going to taste blind. Now, obviously we know that they are both Pinot Noirs. One's from Marlborough and the other's from Central Otago, but we can still create a sense of drama by covering them up, either with a smart, purpose-designed cover like this, or we can cover them up with some tin foil like this. So if you mark somehow on the base of the bottle what it is, so you don't know, and then move the bottles around so you've got no idea. They're both very similar, they're both screw cap even. You can move them around and create a mini tasting. Now, you might be thinking, pre-recorded video, there's no way Tim's going to get this wrong, but I have been forced to avert my eyes while two tasting samples are poured, so I don't know which is which. So here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to compare and contrast the two wines. Now, looking at them against the white background, ideally, you can see there are some differences. Now, we know they're both 2017, but looking at them both, if you're doing that, you can see one, if you're looking straight down, one is a little bit paler, a little sort of brighter red. So that's the one on my left, and the one on the right, a little bit more deeply coloured. So I'm going to take the lighter coloured one first of all, and just give it a swirl. Take the nose, and straight away I'm getting a real sort of vibrant cherry raspberry fruit, very appealing, very fresh on the nose, and then moving on to the palate. Straight away, a lovely punchy spiciness, vibrant red fruits, and a nice tannic structure. Not overly tannic, but enough to give it a nice backbone, but it's got good acidity as well, so it makes it refreshing. This is medium bodied, I would say, and again, lovely length. In terms of development, still quite young. I would suggest I'd probably be quite happy to put this away for another year or two, just let it sort of open out and develop a little bit more. With the second one, as I said, more deeply coloured. So just giving it a nose. Now, to me, this is more earthy, more sort of forest fruits, forest floor, and it feels a little bit more closed. There isn't the same overt sort of strawberry raspberry fruit coming through as with the previous wine. But it's still quite, it's not overt, but there's an intensity about it. There's a sort of a depth of fruit that is very different to the previous wine. Okay, on the palate. As the nose was suggesting, a lot of structure, an intensity of flavour, but still feeling quite closed. The tannin is definitely there, lovely acidity. I've got a real mouth-watering sense on my palate. Lovely length, great finish, you know, really, really intense. And I feel this could probably last even longer than the previous wine. Yeah, I've still got a resounding sort of taste already, still. So, you know, very sort of, you know, similar wines, we know, 2017. I think for me, the first one I tasted was a little bit, you know, brighter in colour, or lighter in colour, and more overt, more obvious cherry raspberry nose. Whereas the second one I tasted, deeper in colour and, you know, more sort of earthy forest fruits. Now, if I had to have a stab at which was which, my gut feel, my sense, because I think it's very difficult to make sort of easy judgments about this is a Marlborough style of Pinot Noir or this is a Central Otago Pinot Noir style. I think that there are so many different sort of versions, varieties, winemaking philosophies out there that I think it becomes a bit of a gamble as to whether there's one characteristic that differentiates one region from another. So I'm going to plump for the lighter coloured wine, if you've got both, tasting at home. The lighter coloured would be the Crimson Pinot Noir, and the more deeply coloured wine, the more earthy structure, being the Wild Earth Pinot Noir from Central Otago. And we'll see if we're right in just a moment. Okay, now it's time for the big reveal of the two Pinot Noirs. Have I got it right? So, the first wine I am told that was poured came from this bottle, wrapped in the silver foil. And in my estimation, that first wine, brightly coloured, was the Atarangi Crimson Pinot Noir from Marlborough. It's all a bit exciting. Obviously, be a bit more exciting if it was live, but as I say, the wines are poured blind. So was I right? Indeed I was. The Atarangi Crimson Pinot Noir was the first wine we poured. And that means, of course, the second wine in the fancy packaging was the Wild Earth Pinot Noir 2017. As far as food matchings are concerned, I think two contrasting dishes with the two contrasting Pinot Noirs. With the Crimson Pinot Noir from Atarangi, I immediately thought perhaps some seared tuna, perhaps on a bed of glass noodle sort of salad with a little bit of sort of, you know, Thai Asian spice. I think that would really sort of bring out the fresh fruit flavours of the wine. And then in contrast, the sort of the greater depth, the more earthiness of the Wild Earth Pinot Noir, I think would be great with a couple of classics, a couple of French classics actually. One, Cassoulet from the south of France, would be super, lots of rich flavours to get stuck into that earthiness. Alternatively, I think would also work well would be Coq au vin, another French classic, and even better if you've made the Coq au vin with a bottle of Wild Earth Pinot Noir I can supply. Our final wine of tonight's online tasting is the Trinity Hill Gimlet Gravel Syrah 2017. Now, Trinity Hill we've already had experience of with their Hawke's Bay Chardonnay, and this is their Syrah. Now, Syrah is perhaps not a great variety that you immediately associate with New Zealand, and it has come to the fore relatively recently, all because of the famous Gimlet Gravels. And back in, really it was 1993, was the date of the first plantings on this particular plot of land just the south of Napier. And it's been a revelation. This was an old riverbed that the course of the river got changed due to an earthquake quite a long time ago, and no one actually realised the potential of this very, very gravelly soil that it could have for vine growing. Sheep had been sort of the main occupiers of the land, but a few pioneers had a go and were very, very impressed with the results. And all of a sudden, with the success particularly of Sauvignon Blanc in Marlborough, taking away a lot of the fame and fortune and glory that Hawke's Bay used to have, Syrad from the Gimlet Gravels is now very much coming to the fore, and some really, really super examples are being produced. So this is the 2017. In terms of the winemaking, it's had 14 months in a mixture of new and not so new French barriques. Let's give it a taste. And I think straight away, just looking at the colour, you can see it's a sort of medium to deep red in colour. 2017, still looking fairly vibrant, fairly purple, so still quite youthful. Then nose-wise, very different to the two Pinot Noirs. This is coming across as brambly fruit, quite earthy. Nice bit of sort of spicy pepper coming through as well, but a real sense of sort of rich ripeness as well. Okay, let's give it a taste. And as the nose was suggesting, spicy fruit, good acidity, and I think, again, lovely sort of tannic structure. 2017 for Syrah, definitely young. This is a wine that I think deserves another 5 years of aging, just to let those sort of lovely sort of Syrah characteristics develop, open out, and let those tannins just sort of soften. As far as food pairing is concerned with the Hawke's Bay Syrah, you need something that's going to pick up on that rich fruit structure and the tannins as well. So what's coming to mind, first of all, perhaps more of a wintry dish, but slow cooked venison casserole I think would go really well with this. But for now, I think roast leg of lamb with lots of rosemary and lots of garlic would be absolutely fab with this. Okay, so that's it. That concludes the very first Richmond and Teddington Wine Society's online video tasting. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I'd be incredibly grateful for any constructive feedback, any comments, because I think we may well be making one or two more of these in the future. I have a couple of thank yous to make. Well, one big thank you to my family, to Fliss, Julia and Hannah, for all their input, particularly to Julia for the editing, non-stop editing, constant reshooting of various takes. So it's been great fun. Thank you for watching and stay safe.